Is my theory of knowledge presentation, ethical limitations on human sciences. So my first real life situation is I'm currently in love with my best friend and they are in a relationship. Is it wrong for me to pursue this person? Making this decision would be based on ethics. So it is beneficial to the point where I am benefiting from the relationship. And so is the friend if they want to be in the relationship, but unethical to the point where the girlfriend or the significant other is now negatively impacted because I am forcing their breakup, and which causes them sadness or her sadness. And so I should not pursue him ethically. Ethics is limiting my ability to be able to be in this relationship because it is wrong. Then on a larger scale, in psychology or human sciences, my ability to be, or doctor's ability and scientists' ability to carry out experiments involving humans can be limited by ethics because it needs to be safe and also just as a whole beneficial, because otherwise if it's negative then they can get into lawsuits or different things that can harm or bring human sciences down. This comes to the point, to what extent is the development or the use of knowledge in human sciences limited by ethics? So experimentation on humans is overall seen as unethical because humans shouldn't necessarily be tested on. There's manipulation or physical harm that can occur, but experiments are still carried out. So this can kind of show that that these ethical boundaries are kind of pushed past. But here there can be experiments where humans are not completely knowing the certain extent or fully aware of the procedure, because otherwise the experiment would be inefficient and would not have accurate results because it is biased. But is unethical because the subjects do not know what psychological damage or any physical effects are going to happen if they're just known the basis of it. So then the experiment is unethical. But there can also be experiments where it is ethical because they can know what they're taking part in, what, say, serotonin is, how serotonin is going to affect them, how much is going to be injected into them, but not know that the experiment is testing morality, because otherwise they would alter their behavior so that they're acting moral or good and can pass whatever they pass a test. Whereas kind of now ethics kind of limits this human sciences and this ability to carry out certain experiments for the development of knowledge. There's also the placebo effect, which can further develop whether or not medications, the side effects or not, are going to be harmful, or if there are any in general. But this placebo effect now brings manipulation and psychological damage, or can bring psychological damage to the person if they're believing they're taking this drug and with these certain side effects, and now experiencing them or not experiencing them. So even though there's not physical effects from the medication, there can be impacts where these psychological impacts are kind of pushed past because the physical damage is what is seen as unethical, and the psychological damage is not necessarily seen. So in human sciences, ethics isn't necessarily limiting this. It's limiting the physical damage that can happen. So running experiments can be canceled or not occur. The development cannot occur from these experiments when it's seen as unethical, but when it is, there can still be certain occasions where it could be unethical, but it still is pushed past, and advancements in human sciences can still be carried out. There is also the point where ethics is kind of limited more than human sciences, the areas, because ethics can have hedonism versus the greater good, where hedonism is, if it brings the person pleasure, then it is all right. Whereas greater good is it needs to help the masses. And so me cheating on a homework assignment could bring me up and bring up my grade, but brings down the rest of the group. And because the curve is higher, so I can argue that it's bringing me pleasure, so it's all right. Whereas the rest of the class would argue greater good, that it is bringing them down. Whereas in human sciences, there's kind of only the greater good aspect, where doctors are limited to this only because there can be a medication that can, in testing, harm a few to save thousands, where it can't be carried out because it harms those few and is unethical and not just to carry out on humans, because it can be dangerous. And then this development is halted because now these humans are facing like physical damage, and so the human size isn't carried out. Or if a doctor is doing their job only for the money and only doing procedures where they'll gain more money on people, where this other procedure can help more patients, then that's seen as unethical as well. And then the procedures are kind of going to be altered to kind of help the greater good. And this area of ethics versus human sciences kind of faces less limitations as humans sciences does, and is more based upon the concept of being ethical in general. There's this real life situation with Bandura study in 1961 where children are watching aggressive behavior to see if they will imitate the behavior, and these adults are either acting violently or nicely towards these Bobo dolls in a room with children watching. And the children watching the aggressive behavior, 88% of them modeled that behavior. So they modeled the behavior that they watched. And this study furthers the development of the knowledge that children should not be necessarily watching these aggressive interactions at a young age because it negatively impacts them. And then this study was also carried out for the development, pushing past the idea that these children now are going to face this psychological damage, that they're going to be more aggressive in their lives because they are watching this behavior. And these few are now negatively impacted to kind of save the rest of the children from watching these negative things. So it's kind of the greater good aspect here again, that that the children like initially in the experiment is unethical, and the experiment is still carried out even though it is harming the children, kind of. So ethics here doesn't have the greatest limitation, whereas if there's physical damage, then there's more limitations. Another real life situation is testing new medications on cancer patients. This would bring new knowledge in and new developments of the knowledge that can benefit greater amount of people. So there's been new testing that shows that the aggressive treatments and medications are not needed for a cure to cancer. But the initial testing of taking these people off these medications could necessarily make it worse, which is unethical. So it has to be seen that also the new treatments aren't aggressive and is going to be as harmful. Otherwise, it's unethical, and there'll be lawsuits and just negative towards human sciences as a whole with people. And so it has to be approved and as ethical that it will help the people versus just being another form that can cost more money for people, because it could make some cancers worse instead of benefiting them. So overall, here it can be that the ends justify the means with limitations, and that limitations are acknowledged versus ignored to carry out a procedure. But also, if it's unethical, then it's not going to be carried out. So it just depends on the experiment, where patients have to decide for themselves if they want to go through treatments that are unethical or not, or human sciences are furthered by people deciding that it should be carried out or deciding in society that it is right.